Wendy, good morning. Not sure. Can you hear me?
I can hear you good. Good morning, Morton Davis and Sue Sandler.
Nice picture of your hair now.
Brian?
Wendy, I see you talking, but can't hear anything.
Yeah, I hear, Wendy, I hear you.
Oh, you do? Good.
There you
Thanks.
go.
You're coming in good. You're coming in good.
Thank you.
Mari, you also coming in good too.
Wendy, thanks for putting the program together.
Oh, you're welcome. It was Rabbi Hoffman that pushed it forward very well. So give him credit.
No, but you too.
I don't believe this innovations.
Well, you viewed it and
Hey, Eric, I got a question. Do you think we have to join B'nai Israel also, considering we both go to Minyan there every morning?
Sue Sandler there.
because that's my computer.
And what's that mean, that little figure there?
If you hit that, that's the whole thing.
Well, maybe we can move our chairs.
Is he in?
Marty, they can hear you. Please stop
Huh?
talking. Off the mute.
Oh.
Morning. Morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I didn't know you were in charge of this program.
Inclusion committee is
Oh, very nice.
Heidi and myself.
Very nice.
You know to shadow him when he gets up and follow him to the bathroom and clean him up. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay for just a little while. All right. I'm going to just stay in the office. Okay. Any question? Yeah. Yeah, I understood. Maybe we found that out. Okay, so you know it's 127, and then 127 is when they give up the phone at 9, and it'll buzz and the door should open up. Okay. All right, great. Are you here tomorrow also?
Yeah.
Saturday, every other Saturday and Sunday? Okay, great. Thank you. Martha, thank you. Thanks. Okay, this is just for. Yeah, not everybody's in service. Okay, yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna give you my number in case you ever have a problem. We live 10 minutes or less away.
Oh, okay. Do he usually have any doctor's appointments or anything on
No,
Saturday?
no, on the weekends.
Oh, okay.
It's my wife and I.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, call me first. I should probably answer. If not,
Okay,
my wife. You can text or call if something's up. All right.
okay.
I have like I said, I'm pretty available if something's up. Basically, it's I don't know what Martha told you. He does move around on his own, but he just needs to be shadowed, and especially in the bathroom. Sometimes he'll leave.
Good morning, Rabbi Morty.
Sometimes he'll leave.
Good to see you.
Morning,
How are you
David.
and Sue doing?
Walk to the bathroom.
Sue's around here somewhere in the.
Okay.
How's Sue doing, Dad?
Walker.
She's there.
Tell him to
Okay.
stop and make him he'll do music, but he'll just forget sometimes.
Good to see you. You feeling okay?
He's in the chair.
Yeah, I'm feeling great.
Okay.
I'm just going stir crazy.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I'm not used to sitting in a house. I'm used to being out and running around.
Yeah, I know. That's the one thing I'm able to run every day. But
Are you still running? Yeah.
I'm still running. That's the only thing keeping me sane too. If I couldn't do that, I don't know what I would be doing. I'd be driving my neighbors crazy running around my apartment, and that would definitely get me thrown out. I don't think I want to do that.
Once in a
Right?
while, he might need help cutting stuff up. He's fine on his own. He always says
It's supposed to rain this morning.
Yeah.
Juice
Well,
from
I'm not the wicked witch. I won't melt as long as there's no lightning. I'm okay. Wear a hat and I'm okay.
Did you go over all this? Might be
I tell you what, I've been enjoying them.
There's some that I didn't know anything about.
I've been enjoying your sermons very much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
95.
Appreciate it.
Very good.
Thanks.
So, he's wearing diapers that he wants a larger size, but when he's got a larger size, he doesn't like things that fit, not tight. He doesn't like things that feel fitting.
All right.
We almost ready? Can't
And
we
they're
go?
not tight, but they're
Oh,
like the way diapers
Hardy,
should
I should say.
fit, not tight.
Right.
And he's
Might we gently remind everyone else to mute their
Can't,
computer?
Right, be careful by
Nice.
the line.
privates would shift because they wouldn't smell inside. His privates would shift, and then he would
Okay.
Brian,
outside. He's not incontinent at all. I mean, he just problem is he just needs to get up and go to the bathroom several too many times during the day.
I'm ready when
then he got
everybody
in
is
the
ready.
diapers that are
Okay.
large and
Ladies and
fine as
Mhm.
far as he says, but he wants to see if we can go back to the
Okay.
large
We remind
because
everybody,
he hasn't had a leak
Mhm.
since
Hey,
he's
Brian,
Brian,
So we're trying to tell him it's a benefit. I tried to tell him yesterday. I said, Dad, would you put a
okay.
diaper? Would you give him a diaper on a baby? They're just gonna leak.
Mhm.
And he's like, no. So
I
I'm
know we're
gonna try to
trying.
just
Brian,
the right size.
Okay.
If he does, after he
Brian,
might need some
Brian.
cleaning up.
Mhm.
He brushes his teeth on his own.
If someone could perhaps call him on his phone?
Right, just let him know because it's not live, Mike. That's not good.
I'll do that, Kazan.
Although there's a paragraph in our early morning prayers that I think is very,
Apropos, yes, there is, definitely.
Oh.
There's somebody here.
You're right.
So
Okay, so
it's not if you might want to.
Who's the host? We can mute everybody and then
walk back and
yes, is any,
forth the apartment a
if
couple
our
times,
host could attempt to mute everyone and then unmute.
He's right.
to
Harvey.
stretch his legs. He feels better after that, but then he's exhausted. So and he'll spend a lot of
I'm
time
the
in the
host, I'm
chair.
not the host.
Okay.
When he's there, would you just, let's say
Who's the-
you get to know him a little bit, and you get to know him.
Joshua Shalom is the
Just
host.
stay in the same room
Okay,
with him.
so
I see that Larry is also a co-host.
Larry, mute everybody.
am.
Okay, thanks.
I come by every day.
On.
I come and live so close to see my dad every day, whether it's 5 minutes or 2 hours,
Mhm.
depends.
Mhm.
But you might see me like now. I came over now because we were trying to. Didn't know.
aha.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for joining us, not only for this and every Shabbat, but actually, as we'll see, this is, it's in the longer stage, it's Pride Shabbat. By the way, JCRC has also said it should be Pride and Solidarity Shabbat. I'll get to that a little bit later. And we have very special guest, my brother, Wayne Hoffman, but I won't do the introduction because he's my brother. He's wouldn't make any sense. Okay. Anyway, we're going to begin today, as we always do, and we ask you to please rise on page 103 if you have the actual Lev Shalem Sidur. Larry, if you have
Page 10 on the Sim Shalom.
or you can just use the screen if that works for you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher nasan l'sech v'hine lavtin ben yom uvein loyla.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tzalmo.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani ben chorim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, abi sharumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, mekaharet al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, mamechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asali kol tzarki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, aseh Yisrael b'gvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, aseh Yisrael b'sifara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, anosein layav koah.
Amen. Please be seated. Page 104.
L'shaneinu hayom v'chayom l'chayim l'chet rachamim beinecha v'einecha reinu v'zikim leinu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomer chasadim tovim li'amo
Hello,
Yisrael.
Israel.
Page 105.
Ashreinu matov l'kenu manoim gerlenu mayofa Yerusha seinu. Ashreinu shenachnu mashkimim u'marivim erevokav yomim pamayim b'chol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Kadesh Shemcha Mitzvah Shemecha v'Kadesh Shemcha b'Yalamecha v'Shiras Matar Siber Kaneinu Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh Shemcha b'Rabim.
Okay, the rabbinic and biblical texts are on 107 to 110, and then after that will be Rabban and Kaddish on 111.
It's 16 through 19 in the sheet.
Yehira Tzam Ufanach Adonai Eloheinu B'Lehi Avosseinu Shetiten Chulchenu B'Sel Esecha V'Niyemi Tamidom Shel Aron HaKohen Ohev Shalom V'Radev Shalom Ohev Es Abri Yosem HaKarban LaTorah.
Okay, again, Rabban and Kaddish is 111.
Page 20 on the same shalom.
Yitkadal V'Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah
Amen.
V'Yalma Divara Tirutei V'Yamlich Malchutei V'Chayechon V'Yomechon U'V'Chayei D'Chol Beit Yisrael V'Agala V'Zman Kari V'Imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach V'Olam V'Olam Hayah. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitmaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei k'kudisha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata da'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen.
Amen.
Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Talmideihon v'al kol Talmidei Talmideihon v'al kol man dioskim b'oraita di v'yatra hadain v'di v'chol atar v'atar Yehei lahon u'lachon shalom rabba china v'chista v'rachamim V'chayin arichin unzona revicha ufarkana min kodam avuhon di bishmaya ve'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav hu barachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Page 112, which is the Psalm for Shabbat.
Oh, you know, when beside the Shannon Baranani near you, Liakiki Ashar Adonai, Suri Velo, Ablasada.
Okay, we're going to go up to page 120, which is Psalm 30, and then after that will be the Mourner's Kaddish on 121. So 120, then 121.
Fafta, Mispedi, the Machali Bitafta Saki Fidas Randy Simcha, Leman, Yasamaka Blada, Madonai Lohai, Leola Madaka.
Okay, again, Mourner's Kaddish 121.
Yit Kadal, V'yit Kadash, Shemei Rabba,
Amen.
V'yalma, V'yvra, Kirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chayei, V'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agala, V'zman Kari, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mivarach Li'olam U'lomei Maya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yit'aler V'yit'alal Shemei D'Kedusha Berichu Ve'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tush B'chata V'nechemata Da'amiran B'yalma V'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen.
Amen. Please rise. Baruch Shemar is 122 in the Leif Shalem.
Baruch Shemar V'haya Ha'olam Baruch Hu Baruch Oseh V'reishis Baruch Shemo Baruch Omer V'yoseh Baruch Hu Baruch Gozer U'Mekayim Baruch Shemo Baruch Merachem Al Haaretz Baruch Hu Baruch Merachem Al Hamriyos Baruch Shemo Baruch Mishalem Sochatov L'Reyav Baruch Hu Baruch Chadot V'Kayom L'Netzach Baruch Shemo Baruch Podeh Umatil Baruch Hu Uvaruch Shemo. Yachid Chei Halamim Melech Mishubachim B'Faradei Ad Shemo Agadol Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mehuval Batishbacha.
And please be seated. 136 in Leif Shalem.
Ashrei Shavishach.
Hey Jay, in the Yasim Shalom. I'm sorry, I thought I
No problem.
was on mute.
Okay, no problem. Shalom.
Tilas Adonai Yidabi Api, Vivarech Klabas Hashem Kachele Lambaed, Vanachnu Nevrech Yam Yatov Yadolam. Hallelujah.
Okay, we continue 140, Psalm 149 in Lev Shalom.
V'samach ein b'thikim v'nechbedem b'chavlei v'arzel, la'asos b'hem mishma kasuv, v'adahu l'chach hasidav. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, v'tzil tzolei shama. Hallelujah, hallelujah, v'tzil tzolei shruah. Kol neshama hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol neshama hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Uvarosh Shem Kaved Leolam, V'Yimalech Kaved Eskal Haaretz, Amen v'Amen.
Please rise, page 143.
Page 92 in the same Shalom.
Vaya Yisrael es Mitzrayim Meisal Savasayam, Vaya Yisrael Sierra Gadol Asher Adonai b'Mitzrayim, Vayiraham es Adonai, Vayamina b'Adonai, Uvamoshavdo. Oz Yashir Moshe Uvenei Yisrael Es Ashira Hazov Ladonai Vayomru Leimar Ashira Ladonai Ki Go Sus Berachva Rama Vayam Ozi v'zimros yavayehi lilishua ze'eli v'yanvehu Elohei avi b'ramamenhu Adonai yishmelchama Adonai shemo Markevot paro v'chelo yaravayam Umivcha Ashalishav to be you beyond to Tehomot Yechas Yumu Yardu Vimsalas Kamoav and Yemincha Adonai Nedari Bakoach Yemincha Adonai Tirato Yeh. Ki l'Adonai Amelucha Moshe b'goyim, v'li Moshe b'ati al nishmod es ha'aresav, v'yisar l'Adonai Amelucha, v'yadonai l'melech l'kol ha'aretz, v'yamu Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
You can be seated. We're going to continue 145 in Lev Shalom.
Page
Nishmas
94,
kol
Steve.
chai, tivarech Hashem Adonai Eloheinu.
Oh, but why do you want to put me so big?
I can't, let me see. Full screen. Don't know where everyone else is.
Hallel, Chad, Shabbat, and Nevarach, Hashem, Kachecha, Kamor, David, Barki, Nafshiach, Adonai, Vachaka, Rabbi, Yeshem, Kodesha, Hoel, Besasmos, Zecha, Gadol, Bechad, Shemecha, Akibar, Lanetach, Miano, Rabin, Oversecha, Amelech, Hayoshe, Valkise, Rambenisa.
Okay, Yasher Koach to Harvey. We're going to continue 147, the sixth line in Lev Shalem.
And 336 in the same shalom.
Yochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo tzadikim b'Yonai eloi sharim navatim Fi sharim tit'alal u'divrei tzadikim titbara ובלשון החסידים תדרמם, ובקרב קדושים תקדש, ובמקלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל. שכן חובת כל היצורים לפניך, Adonai Eloheinu ואלוהי אבותינו, להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל, ולקלס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות. דוד בן ישי, עבדך משיחך.
Rise, 148.
338.
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. האל המלך הגדול והגדול וכי לפניו מלאנו ואבותינו שישוע לזמר אוזן משנה צדקו וברכה תהילה ונפארת קדושה ומלכות. ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך גדול בתשבחות אל ההודות האדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך הלכי העולמים. יקרא ויקדש שמי רבה ועלמא דברה קירותי וימלך מלכותי וחייכון ויומכון ובחייך בית ישראל הגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויפואר וירומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלש בקדושו בריחו לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמרה מעולמה ואמרו אמן. Baruch Adonai HaMevarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated, page 150.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uvorech choshech oseh shalom uvoreh et hakol.
I don't know what's going on.
זולתך, אפס בלך ומדומך, אין כרכך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה, אין זולתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא, אפס בלתך גואלנו לימות המשיח, אין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. I recommend you put your computer on mute, everyone, so you can sing out at home. El Adon, al kol ha'ma'asim, baruch u'mevorach, befi kol neshama, godlo betuvo, male olam da'at udvuna, sovev imoto, amiko ha'chayot ha'kodesh, v'nehedor b'chapor, Allah Merkava, Sechur Mishor, Lifnei Chiso, Chesed Verachamim Lifnei Chvodo, Tovim Me'orot Shebara Eloheinu, Yitzaram B'dahat, B'bina Uvaskel, Koach Ugvura, Natana Bahem Liyov Moshlim, Bekerev Tevel, Leim Ziv, Umefikim Noda, Noezivam Bechol Ha'olam, Tzemechim Etzetam Besasim Bevoam, Osim B'yeim Oretzon Ekonam, Be'er V'chavod, Nonim Lishmo Tzola, Verina, Lezecher Malchuto, Kara, Lashemesh, Vayizrach or ra'a vehitkin tzurat halvana shalach nonim lo kol tzvam arom tiferetu gedula serafim ve'ofanim ve'chayot hakodesh Lahel asher shabbat mikol ha'masim yom hashvit elav yashar v'kisei kvodo tiferet ha'tamim
152 at the top.
yom hashvit shabbat yom shabbat tov v'tov v'zevra yom zevkar melchem le'vali yom zevkar rishon v'shamayim Yitbarach Mosheinu al shabach ma'aseh yadecha Ve'al me'ori u'sh'asita yifa'aruch ha'selah.
Page 153.
Page 344.
Kulam ahovim, kulam berurim, kulam giborim. Ve'kulam osim b'ma'ov yiraretzon konam. Ve'kulam bodchim bepihem, b'kdushat Torah, l'shiro v'zimah, u'mevarachim shabachim farim. ומריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שמה אל המלך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא הקדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליהם כל המלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונונים רשות זה לזה, מהתיש ויוצרם מנח הרוח, Esafa b'rabini makrosha, kulam kecharonim, yomrim b'yira, kadosh, 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 Adonai tzvaot, melach ol haaretz kivodo. Ve'ofanim chayot hakodesh, ve'rosh gadol minasim u'matzrafim, משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקום עולה לברוך ממוליכנו. המחדש בטובו בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית אמור לעושה אורים גדולים כלעולם חסדו. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהר על יורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
Page 154, Avarba.
אהבה רבה אהבתנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ותרה חמלת עלינו. אבינו מלכנו, בעבור אבותינו, שבטחו בך, אבינו מלכנו, ותלמדם חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו תלמדנו, אבינו הרחמן, המרחם רחם עלינו, ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ולחל לבבינו לאהבה, וליראת שמך. ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך גדול ונורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. אבינו לשלום ירבה כנפות הארץ, ותולכנו כל ממילות לארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועת אתה ובחרת מכל המלשון, וקרבתנו לשמך גדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
I've got the same, I found it in here.
Okay, we're going to gather the corner of the talit, the tzitzit, and we'll make the blessing on 156 over the tzitzit.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם אחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת ויציב נחם וקיים ישר לדור ודור קיים ושמו קיים וכיסא נכון מלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת עוד רבה קיים קיים מיל ולתן ואלינו על בנים ואל דורתים וכל דורת זה אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו מלכנו מלך אבותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו יוצאנו צור ישועתנו בעדנו מצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים זולתך עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם מגן משאיר להם אחרי מחול טוב וטוב
It's not bad listening to the whistle.
$158 is what you're looking at in Lev Shalem.
352.
Eilol elyon baruch hu mevorach Moshe uMiriam u'bnei Yisrael chanu shira B'simcha rabah v'yamru chulam. I'd like to try a different way of encouraging some congregational singing. If you were with us last night, we used this melody. I recommend that you mute your computer and sing at home. And what you'll do is you'll just repeat after me. And if your computer is muted, this will work really well for you at home. Ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha, nedar b'kodesh, Yorah, Tehilot, Oseh, Veleh, Shira Chadasha, Shibachu Geuli עומדים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. And now we can stand together and keep singing. Sur Yisrael, kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, ufteich ilumecha, Yehuda ve'Yisrael. Go aleinu, Adonai tzvaot shemo, Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch ata Adonai, Da'al Yisrael.
The Amidah for Shachrit 159.
Adonai Sataytika.
54 in Sing Shalom.
Baruch ata Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol, Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, Umevii Goel Livnei B'neihem, Le'man Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer Ufoked U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch ata Adonai, Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah, Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Ata Rav Lehoshia, Morid Hatal. Mechalkel Chaim bechesed, Mechayei metim berachamim rabim. Mechalkel Chaim bechesed, Mechayei metim berachamim rabim. Somech noflim berov vecholim, matir asurim. Mekayem emunato lishenei apar, mi chamocha b'al gerurot, umi domelach, melech me'amidu, b'chaye umatzmiach Yeshua, ene'eman ata l'chayot metim. Baruch ata Adonai, Mechayei Ametim.
Kedusha 161.
In 350.
Mekadesh et Shemocha b'olam, Kashem Shemat Shemato, Tishrei Amorom. Katuv hayad v'yecha v'karazel ve'amar Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai tzvaot Melech kol haaretz kivodo Az b'kol rosh gadol Hari v'chazak mashlim kol Minasim l'umat serafim le'umatam Baruch yomeru Baruch kivod Adonai mimakomo Mimakomocha Malkeinu Tofia V'timloch aleinu Kim anachnu lach מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון תתקדש ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ונצח נצחים בעינינו תירנה מלכותך כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך ידי דוד משיח צדקך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
The full reader's cottage, the Kaddish Shalem 167.
392 in the Siem Shalom.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה והלמד דברה קירותי וימלך מלכותי בחייכון וימכון ובחייכו בית ישראל ועגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך והעולם ועלמי יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויפואר וירומה ויתנשא וירהדר וירעלה ויהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירם בלמה ויאמרו אמן תתקבל צלותו נבואותו לכל ישראל קודם ובהוני ושמיה ויאמרו יהי שלום רבה מן שמיה בחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ויאמרו Amen.
Okay, well, good to see so many of us today. And we've reached the section where we'll be doing a little Torah reading. This week's portion is portion Naso. And there's a second reading in the book of Numbers of Bamidbar. And as some of you follow me on Facebook know, whenever I see portion Naso, which opens with a census of some of the families of the Levites, I think of the late Danny Andron, Alav Hashem, really wonderful member of mine when I was in Lake Success, who read portion Naso at his bar mitzvah in the 30s, and continued to do so for more than 60 years, with the exception of 1 year during World War II when there was no scroll and he was in service. There was no scroll that particular year. Other than that, his streak was unbroken. And by the way, even as he developed dementia and his short-term memory eroded, for quite a few years into his struggles with dementia, he could read portion Naso. He could still get up and read it. He didn't know where he was or what day it was, but if you held the scroll in front of him and told him to start chanting Naso, he could do it. Shows you that the memory is quite strong. Anyway, we're going to start today. We have an abbreviated reading, and our reader is Gabriella Friedman, and it is her bat mitzvah anniversary. It's year 2. It's year 2. And we hope you'll enjoy a Danny Andron streak, and you'll read portion Naso for 60 years, even if I may not be around to see all 60 readings of that. If you want to follow portion Naso in the Etz Chaim book that we have, if you have a copy, it's 791. If you use a regular Chumash, it's chapter 4, verse 21 of the book of Numbers. And Gabriella, Mazel Tov, and we look forward to your first Aliyah, the first reading.
וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, נשא את ראש בני גרשון גם הם לבית אבותם ולמשפחתם מבין 30 שנה ומעלה עד 50 שנה תפקוד אותם כהן לצוות צבא לעבוד עבודה באוהל מועד. זאת עבודת משפחות הגרשוני לעבוד ומשל.
Okay, Yasher Koach, Gabriella. Good, wonderful. I'm glad you took the time to read for us. And our second Aliyah, which begins with verse 25, a somewhat earlier bar mitzvah celebrant, right? Back in the days of records. We'll be reading secondly Todd Gardner. If you're following again in a regular Chumash, it's chapter 4 of the book of Numbers, verse, we're beginning with verse 25.
V'nasu et Yeriot HaMishkan ve'et Ohel Moed Michsehu Michsei Hatachas asher alav milma'ala ve'et masach petach ohel moed ve'et kalei ha'hechatzer ve'et masach petach sha'ar hechatzer asher al hamishkan ve'al mizbeach zaviv Ve'et metrehem, ve'et kol kalei avodatam, ve'et kol asher ye'aseh lahem va'avadu. Al pi Aaron uvanav tiyeh kol avodat b'nei hagershoni l'chol ma'asam u'l'chol avodatam ufkadet Tem alehem b'mishmeret et kol ma'asam zot avodat mishpachot b'nei hagershoni b'ohel moed u'mishmartam b'yad Itamar ben Aharon hakohen.
Okay, Yasher Koach, Todd, another bar. And the final Aliyah would be chanted by Noreen Friedman. I don't know if it's your bat mitzvah anniversary. We don't know that. But in any case, just to be clear, the beginning of the portion talked about the Gershon family's obligation in transporting the tabernacle. They basically, to break it down, took the curtains and loaded them onto wagons for transport. And this reading talks about Merari, one of Gershon's brothers. They loaded on the sort of the boards and the framework. And that was their responsibility, because each one had a different task. So if you're following in a Chumash, it's chapter 4, verse 29 of the book of Numbers. It's 792 if you have an Etz Chaim book that we use in Shul.
B'nai Merari lemishpachotam leveit avotam tifkodotam mi bein shloshim shana v'mala ve'ad bein hamishim shana tifkadem kol haba latzava la'avod et avodat ochel moed vezot mishmeret misa'am l'chol avodatam bi ochel moed karshei hamishkan Uvrichav, Umidav Adanav, Ve'amudei, Hechatzer Saviv, Yadnechem, V'tedotam, Umetrechem, Lachol Kalechem, Ulachol, Avodatam, Uvshemot Tifkedu, Et Kalei Mishmeret Masa'am, Zod Avodat, Mishpechot B'nai Merari, L'chol Avodatam Be'ochel Moed, Be'yad Itamar, Ben Aharon HaKohen.
Thank you, Noreen and Nashikoch. And for those who don't know, Noreen at the present time is arranging for the Kriyat HaTorah on a weekly basis. Something that Harvey Lebson's on hiatus. He's on furlough, right? After 40 years. Long run, right? I was in high school 40 years ago. Okay. Anyway, we're going to continue in just a moment with the Misha Beirach. And as we tell you every week, if you have a Siddur, it's 173, by the way. When we reach the point where we include the names, you just unmute yourself and we'll try to, as orderly we can, include all of the names that you have.
Mikor habracha Motenu, process of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
Okay, and I'm going to, in just a moment, recite the Misha Berach, and as I've mentioned, we're going to unmute ourselves in an orderly way when you have the names for me. Misha Berach, Avotenu, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Imotenu, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, V'Leah, V'Yivarech, V'Yirape, Et HaCholim, Moshe, Zerach, and Sarah, That Chaya, Bat Hensha, Alka, Bat Leah, V'Et Hadol Chaya, Bat Rachel, V'Et Binyamin Hillel ben Perol. Binyamin Hillel, yes, ben Perol. Okay, now I'll take all the other names, so just unmute yourself if you have a name.
Estelle
Roth. Bobby Cohen and Leonard Tarloff.
Ed Stelsky and Alan Linford.
Mark Green.
Terry McCatson, Alex Katay, Obadiah Cohen.
Marsha Greenberg, Bob Greenberg, and Alan Greenberg.
Leah Bella, Benjamin Vassar.
Green Gilardi.
Meir ben Mindel Rivka, Benjamin ben Rivka.
Green Gilardi, Margaret Gilardi, and Joe Gilardi.
Meir ben Mendel Rivka.
Malka Batmani, Label Yisrael, Bat Golda, Larry Cohen.
Chaya Bat Leah Vehershel Kara Gluscoder, and Hannah Ann Burson.
Marilyn Cammons, Bernie Petruski, George Saltz, Fran Claiborne,
Arlene Mix, Ben Dolgen, Joan Resin.
Any others? Not get a chance. Okay. Akadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleim Lachazikam Larpotam Yishlach Lahem Mehei Ra Refuah Shlema Min Hashamayim Refuah Tanefesh V'Adaguf B'Toch Shar Cholim V'Chazek Yedidei Oskim B'Tzarcheiam Shabbat Hi Milizok Refuah Krova Lavo Ashtar Ba'Agalav Yizmon Kariv and Amar Amen.
Imotenu Mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
To rise for the half Kaddish.
Okay. Yikadal ve'yikadash shemei rabah ve'olma divrat kirutei v'yamlich malachutei v'chayechon u'v'yamechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael bagala bagala u'v'zman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach le'alam lal me'almaya yitbarach yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipoar v'yidromam v'yidnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kodeshah Richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran bi'alma v'yiberu Amen.
Okay, you can be seated. The Haftarah for this morning is taken from the Book of Judges. One of the really fascinating ones. It's about the birth of Samson. And of course, we know the story of Samson. He was one of the great judges of Israel, and he saved Israel through his great physical strength. But its secret was that he was to be, during his lifetime, a Nazir, was to be a Nazirite. And among the strictures that a Nazirite observed was that the hair of a Nazirite was never trimmed. Never trimmed. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of Nazirites these days, but anyway, that was one of the things. So of course, you know, his parents were told to make sure that they didn't allow him to drink alcoholic beverages, and as we mentioned, cut his hair, trim his hair in any particular way. If you want to follow it in a regular Chumash, it's the 13th chapter of the book of Judges, right? And if you want to follow in the Etz Chaim books, it's 8:13, and it's going to be chanted by Ed Weisel.
No.
Ed, please unmute yourself.
You're muted.
There I am.
Go ahead.
This is chanted without the brachot, correct?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Vayehi.
Yeah, Dad.
Huh? I'm sorry, what?
Where you going? Bathroom?
Vayehi ish echad mitzora. Is there a problem?
Ed, I apologize. One of our congregants may not be muted. Please try to continue.
Okay. Ish echad mitzora mimishpachat hadani ushmo manoach ve'ishto akara ve'lo yaladam vayera malach Adonai el ha'isha vayomer eleha הננה את עקרה ולא ילדת והרית וילדת בן ואתה אישה מרינה ואל תשתי יין ושיכר ואל תאכלי כל טמא כי הנחרה ויולדת בן ומורה לא יעלה על ראשו כי נזיר אלוהים יהיה הנער מן הבטן והוא יחל להושיע את ישראל מיד פלישתים ותבוא האישה ותאמר לאישה לאמור איש האלוהים בא אליי ומראהו כמראה מלאך האלוהים נורא מאוד ולא שאלתיהו אין מזהו ואת שמו לא הגיד לי ויאמר לי הנחרה ויולדת בן ואתה אל תשתי יין ושיכר ואל תאכלי כל טומאה כי נזיר אלוהים יהיה הנער מן הבטן עד יום מותו. ויתר מנוח אל אדוני ויאמר בי אדוני איש האלוהים אשר שלחת יבוא נעוד אלינו ויורנו מה נעשה לנער היולד. וישמע האלוהים בקול מנוח ויבוא מלאך האלוהים עוד אל האישה והיא יושבת בשדה ומנוח אישה אין עמה ותמהר האישה ותרוץ ותגר לאישה ותאמר אליו הנה נראה אלי האיש אשר בא ויום אלי ויקום וילך מנוח אחרי אשתו, ויבוא אל האיש, ויאמר לו, אתה האיש אשר דיברת אל האישה, ויאמר אני. ויאמר מנוח, אתה יבוא דבריך, מה יהיה משפט הנער ומעשהו. ויאמר מלאך אדוני אל מנוח, מכל אשר אמרתי אל האישה תשמר, מכל אשר יצא מגפן היין לא תאכל, ויין השיכר אל תשת, וכל טומאה אל תאכל, כל אשר ציוויתיך תשמור. ויאמר מנוח אל מלאך אדוני, נצרה נא אותך, ונעשה לפניך גדי עזים. ויאמר מלאך אדוני אל מנוח, אם תעצרני לא אוכל בלחמך, ואם תעשה עולה לאדוני תעלנה, כי לא ידע מנוח כי מלאך אדוני הוא. ויאמר מנוח אל מלאך אדוני, מי שמך? כי יבוא דברך וכיבדנוך. ויאמר לו מלאך אדוני, למה זה תשאל לשמו והופן לי. ויקח מנוח את גדי העזים ואת המנחה, ויעל על הצור לאדוני. ומפליא לעשות, ומנוח ואשתו רואים. ויהי ועלות עליו מעל המזבח השמיימה. ויעל מלאך אדוני בלחב המזבח, ומנוח ואשתו רואים, ויפלו על פניהם ארצה. ולא יסף עוד מלאך אדוני להיראו על מנוח ואל אשתו, אז ידע מנוח כי מלאך אדוני הוא. ויאמר מנוח אל אשתו, מות נמות, כי אלוהים ראינו. ותאמר לו אשתו, לא חפץ אדוני להמיתנו, לא לקח מידינו עולה ומנחה, ולא הראנו את כל אלה, וכעת לא השמיענו כזאת. ותלד האישה בן, ותקרא את שמו שמשון. ויגדל הנער ויברכהו אדוני, ותהל רוח אדוני לפעמו במחנה דן, בין שרה ובין אשתאול.
Ed, Yasher Koach. As always, really a pleasure. It's well, it's one, I always say it. It's one of my favorite Haftorahs. Sorry, I always say that. It is. We're going to now ask you to turn back in the Sidur. If you have the Leif Shalem Sidur, it's page 177. And then we're going to do this. That's the prayer for our country, and that's going to be followed by the prayer for the state of Israel, 178. So we ask you to please rise.
Page 415 in the Sim Shalom.
And you can unmute yourself for the second paragraph, sir.
Prayer for our country.
Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessings upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai,
God, whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit will awaken all inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land.
May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell upon earth. May you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. The nation shall not lift up sword
against nations, neither shall they learn war anymore.
For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say,
Amen.
Amen. Okay, and again, we're going to do the prayer for the state of Israel. You can see it on the screen. It's 178 in the city.
416.
Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Golo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Golo. Baruch, Baruch, and Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzlichot Geulatenu, Hagen Aleha, Efrat Chastecha, Uperos Aleha, Sukkot Shlomecha. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Golo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Golo. Anatata Shalom, Shalom Baretz, Anatata Shalom Baretz, V'simchat olam, V'simchat olam, V'simchat olam, Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'gola. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo.
Okay, you can be seated. We're going to continue with the Ashrei, page 181.
Page
And-
120.
Okay, and we will be led by Gabriella Friedman. And how about if everybody else puts themselves on mute, then we will hear Gabriella, and you can do the congregational lines at home. It will work out great.
Okay. Asher Yashrei V'techa Odi Halalu Chasela Asher Am Shekachalo Asher Am Shadonai Eloham Tehila LeDavid Amim Chalahai HaMelech Baruch Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed B'chol Yom Avarchecha V'halala Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed Gadol Adonai Hamul Omer V'ligdolato Ein Cheker Hallelujah, Shabbat Ma'asecha, V'gvuratecha Yagidu, Hadaka V'hodecha, V'divrei Niflotecha Asicha, V'zuz Noratecha Yomeru, V'dacha Asabrana, V'haravticha Yabiru, V'tikatcha Yiranenu, Chanun Berachum Adonai, Erech Apayim U'dacha Sed, Tavad Na'lako, V'chama V'kol Ma'asav, Yeducha Adonai Kol Ma'asecha, V'chasidecha Yevarchucha, Tavad Machucha Yameru, V'racha Yedaberu, L'odia Livnei Hadam Gevrotav, V'kvod Hadar Malchuto, Malchutcha Malchut Kol Olamim, U'mamshaltecha B'chol Dor V'ador, Samech Adonai L'chol HaNoflim, V'zakef L'chol HaKfufim, Einei Cholecha Yisaviru, V'atanatan Lahem et Techlon Beito, Poteach et Yadecha, U'maspia L'chol Chai Ratzon, Tzadik Adonai B'chol Dvacha, V'chasid B'chol Ma'asav, Karov Adonai L'chol Korav, L'chol Asher Yikrahu Ve'emet, V'tzon Yirav Yaseh, V'esher V'tom Yishma V'yoshiim, Shomer Adonai Kol Havav, V'yekol Rashayim Yashmid, Tehilat Adonai Yedaber Pi, V'yivarech Kol Basar Shem Kodesh Le'olam Va'ed, V'anachnu Nevarech Ya, Me'ata V'yad Olam, Hallelujah.
Okay, that is 2 thumbs up. Yeah, Cantor Geller's clapping silently, right? Okay, so we've reached a part of the service where we want to carry forward our concept that this is Pride Shabbat. And I know we've had a number here, although this is my first at BSO. And we're honored even to have a special guest, but I'll leave that to Wendy and to Heidi. I think to Heidi to do the introduction. I know Heidi has something she's sharing, and we're doing the introduction. So, okay, whoever wants to come on and take it from here, let's go ahead and take it.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Am I unmuted? Yeah, okay. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. There's so many important issues going on in our country and the world right now. I'm just thrilled that everybody could be here to help us celebrate Pride Shabbat, since June is Pride Month. We have a very special speaker today that I'd like to introduce, but before that, I'd like to read a reading that came from Leviticus 25. I need new glasses. When I'm allowed out to get new glasses, I'll get new glasses. Leviticus 25:10, and the reading goes as such. Of pride and liberation. The time is nearing once again of our accounting of our own esteem, of gathering our pride in our accomplishments and in ourselves, a time of standing up and declaring who we are and proclaiming liberation for all to hear. It should be so simple to take pride in who we are and how God made us to be. And oh, those walls, traps, and barriers that are put in our way and all the distractions meant to lead us astray. It has taken us very long, and yet not long at all, to rise and proclaim freedom for ourselves and many others as well, to make our land free of all who are different, to make it safe for our stories to tell. So now is the time to liberate the land and ourselves as well, as we declare our love for those like us, or across the lines of gender or of both sexes. We do it with pride and love and faith, and in so we liberate us all. Ukratem dror be'aretz l'chol yoshveha. Proclaim liberty throughout the land to all who live there. And now I would like to introduce our special speaker for today. I'm glad that I got his biography because he's a little more than Rabbi Hoffman's brother, but he is Rabbi Hoffman's brother. So we have Wayne Hoffman here, who's the author of 3 novels, including Sweet Like Sugar, which won the American Library Association's Stonewall Book Award. He is also executive editor of Tablet Magazine, a daily online Jewish magazine. His writing has appeared in the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, The Advocate, Village Voice, The Nation, and The Forward, where he also served as editor for several years. A native of Silver Spring, he lives in New York City and the Catskills, where he is today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to everybody Wayne Hoffman.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom, Happy Pride. Thank you for that introduction. Hi, Scott. Hi, Dad. I'm Wayne Hoffman. I'm the rabbi's brother. Don't let the gray beard fool you. I'm his younger brother by several years. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about growing up gay and Jewish in Montgomery County. And I'll also read a little bit from my novel, Sweet Like Sugar, which is set not very far from B'nai Shalom. I grew up in Silver Spring in a traditional Jewish home. My mother kept a kosher kitchen. We went to shul every Saturday at Sher Tefillah in its old location on Lockwood Drive before it moved to George Avenue. That's where I attended Hebrew school for, I think it was 107 hours a week. It's also where I was bar mitzvahed. I went to Habonim Dror Camp Mosheva, a labor Zionist summer camp modeled on a kibbutz. I studied Israeli folk dance at the JCC in Rockville. Later, I worked several summers there as their unofficial mashgiach for their day camps. I competed in the National Bible Contest. I didn't win the way Scott did, but that's probably why today he's the rabbi and I'm not. I was also gay. This was something I knew from a very young age, but unlike being Jewish, it was something I didn't share with anybody at all until I was 15, which at the time seemed like a very long time to keep that kind of secret. This was also in the mid-'80s, at the worst years of the AIDS epidemic, and not a fun time to come out as gay. But I did come out. In 1987, when I was 16, although my parents didn't know it at the time, I met my first boyfriend. I also made my first trip to a gay men's health clinic and I had my first HIV panic attack. That year, after I graduated from Springbrook, I left for Tufts outside Boston, and I was far enough away from home that I could finally come out publicly. Within a week, I had come out to my entire dorm and started attending the gay campus group. Within a month, I was marching on Washington for gay rights and leading campus workshops about gay life. Within a year, I was running that campus gay group, editing a column about gay issues for the campus newspaper, volunteering at AIDS Action in Boston. By the time I graduated, I'd written my thesis on bisexual integration into the queer community, protested with ACT UP and Queer Nation, interned on Capitol Hill with the Human Rights Campaign Fund, and started writing for the Washington Blade, the gay paper in DC, the same newspaper where I would later answer a personal ad when I was 18 and meet the man who is, more than 30 years later, my husband. You'll notice what's missing from my college years. I never joined Hillel or a Jewish fraternity. I didn't live in the Bayit, which was the Jewish student housing at Tufts. I didn't attend synagogue. I didn't keep kosher. I gave up Israeli dance. Other than taking a couple years of Hebrew, Jewish studies were not part of my academic experience. Why? I didn't think I could be both Jewish and gay at the same time, at least not in any meaningful way. I'd grown up with a rabbi who was, I'm going to be generous, not exactly accepting. This was public knowledge. And back then, this is the 80s, this was par for the course for the conservative movement. I came out to my parents more than a year before my brother's wedding. And although I didn't know it at the time, my mother, as she told me later, made sure that our rabbi never found out because she wasn't sure if he knew I was gay, that he'd allow me on the bima for my own brother's wedding. Needless to say, there was no Pride Shabbat in the 80s, not at Shir Tefillah. It took me a long time in college and after college to realize that something was missing, that I missed my Jewish life. But it took me even longer to figure out how exactly I could integrate the two in a way that felt authentic to me. In New York, where I've lived for 27 years, there's a terrific LGBT synagogue, Congregation Beit Simchat Torah. I tried going, it wasn't for me. As I once told a coworker who asked me why I wasn't a member, my problem with synagogue isn't that it's not gay enough. Before I came out as gay, I came out as an atheist. Synagogue was just never how I felt connected to being Jewish. My brother is the rabbi. I always say he goes to synagogue enough for both of us. So where did I find my place? As it turned out, it was through writing. I worked for a decade in the gay press. I started working at the Washington Blade and then syndicated and moved on from there. But after a decade, I found myself looking for a new job, and there was an opening for a managing editor at the Forward, the storied Yiddish newspaper. I applied. My politics largely aligned with the Forward's politics, left of center, even though I wasn't sure about their take on gay issues at that point. I went in for my interview, and I found out that the editor-in-chief was, like me, a Habonimnik. He'd also gone to a Habonim summer camp. I told him it seemed like this was beshert, meant to be. And it was. What did I find at the Forward? What did I learn? That I could be my whole gay self in a Jewish environment. That I could reconnect to the parts of Jewish culture and observance that had meaning to me. That I could be gay and Jewish at the same time. I stayed at the Forward for more than 5 years until I left to help start Tablet, the Jewish magazine where I've worked for the past 12 years. During my stint at the Forward, I also started writing fiction for the first time after a decade as a journalist. I started writing in my spare time. And I discovered that through fiction, there was another way for me to connect being Jewish and gay. 3 novels later, all of which have gay Jewish protagonists, I found my place in 2 communities at once. And it's actually a day at the Forward that inspired my second novel, Sweet Like Sugar, which I'm going to read to you today from. So when I was at the Forward, I had an office with a couch. This was a rare thing. It was rare to have an office. I was the only person with a couch. There are various reasons for this. None of them are fun. It's mostly that I was there all night editing and needed to take naps sometime. But we worked on one side of an office, and the other side of the office was the Forward, the Yiddish newspaper that started as the Forward 120 years ago. The 2 papers were sisters, and they shared an office space, but they were basically separate. We didn't really have a whole lot of communication between the 2. And a lot of people who worked at the Forwards were older men who spoke Yiddish and didn't necessarily speak English. Their second language might have been Russian in some case. At that point, the editor-in-chief, Boris Sandler, didn't really speak English. So there wasn't a lot of communication. But I was in my office one morning, and one of the editors who did speak English from the Yiddish side came over and said, one of our production guys is really sick, and he needs to go home, but he won't. But maybe if he could lie down on your couch, he'll feel better, because he's really not doing well. Do you mind if he lies down on your couch? I said, fine. This man came in, laid down on my couch, kicked off his shoes, and went to sleep. The man was probably north of 80, white beard, dressed in a white shirt, black kippah, black slacks, the black shoes that were sitting on my floor next to the trash can in case he threw up. And he went to sleep. I was in the middle of a work day, and as my staff would come in to ask me questions, I'd say, shh, and I'd point to the sleeping man on my couch, who none of them recognized. They'd look confused and back up. And as I sat there staring at this man sleeping in my office, I started to think, what happens if he wakes up? What can we talk about? Do we even speak the same language? Literally. and certainly metaphorically. Here I was, a gay, lefty, atheist, socialist, and an Orthodox man 40, 50 years my senior, who I didn't know his stances on politics at all, but they were not necessarily mine. What would we say to each other? Here's what really happened. He snored a little bit, he got up, he went back to work, and we never shared a word. That's the real story. But the fact that it got my gears turning turned into Sweet Like Sugar. The opening scene of Sweet Like Sugar, we start with Benji Steiner, who's a young gay Jewish man living in suburban Maryland, who has an office in what is essentially Kent Mill Shopping Center. He's a graphic designer working in a small private office, and there's an elderly rabbi named Jacob Zuckerman who runs a Jewish bookstore in the front of the shopping center. And one day, Rabbi Zuckerman is not feeling well from the heat, and he comes into Benji's office to lie down on the couch to start feeling better, except in this case, in the fictitious world, they do start a conversation and they do start a relationship. So here's where it changes. They're really, and this is not a spoiler, Rabbi Zuckerman in the book is an Orthodox rabbi. Benji Steiner, the narrator of the book, is a young gay man. They're going to come into conflict. This is not a spoiler. You're supposed to see this coming. The question is, then what? Really, when I was writing the book, I figured there are three possible things that are going to happen. Option one, the rabbi wakes up and says, oh my gosh, what have I been thinking with this orthodoxy? Of course, everything I've believed all these years is silly, and he walks away from all of that, and he and young Benji Steiner hold hands and go off to a gay pride march, and everyone lives happily ever after. It's a lovely story. It's also a fairy tale. Option two, the rabbi throws Benji out of his life, and there's no reconciliation. This is a very realistic story. This happens all the time. Unfortunately, it's also a very, very short book. It's a couple pages. So what's the third option? The third option is for the two men to realize that their relationship, which is essentially almost a grandfatherly grandson relationship, to realize that the relationship has a value and it's worth preserving. And that the only way around this conflict is to go right through it. There's no other option. And it's not easy for either man to make himself vulnerable, to listen to the other man, to learn something that he didn't already know, and to live with being uncomfortable, and to live in that space of conflict, and to live in that space of less than perfect harmony. This is something a lot of us are thinking about today. But as long as they're willing to learn and continue to move forward, there is the possibility that their relationship, which has grown valuable, can continue. That's the story that took shape in my head that day at the Forward, watching the old man, whose name was Shloimi, sleeping on my couch, and in reality saying nothing. But what's running through the book connecting all of this is Benji's backstory. And the Benji's backstory, told through flashbacks, is a series of scenes explaining how he grew up as a young Jewish gay man in Montgomery County, and how his identities as being gay and Jewish came into conflict, and how that conflict changed over the years as he grew up from a child into an adult. Some of these flashbacks come from my actual life. Some of them are inspired in very broad strokes by things that happened in my actual life, at camp, at college, at Hebrew school. This, what I'm going to read you today, is one that does not come directly out of my life. It comes in much broader strokes, but I thought it was appropriate today, as people are taking to the streets in protest and marching, to read a section that's also, in part, about taking to the streets in protest and marching. It's not an entirely happy story. I wish I could come to you for Pride Shabbat and say, today I'm going to uplift you and tell you about the happy ending at the end of the rainbow. That's not what I'm going to do. What I want to do is try to lay out some of the conflicts and difficulties that a lot of LGBT Jews carry with them inside, the scars and the difficulties that we carry on our shoulders through our lives that you may not see. The reason is, and that's something, here's something all Jews should understand, that even in happy times, even on a happy holiday, even during Pride Month, which is a celebration, we remember the parts that weren't so happy and that were a little more difficult that brought us to this day today. I think I just summed up half the Jewish holidays on the calendar. And that's what pride is too. So today I'm going to read you a section from Sweet Like Sugar. It's April 25th, 1993. And even though it's been a while since any of us have actually done this, we're going to get on the subway. The first time I rode the subway without my parents was on a Hebrew school field trip to see the new Holocaust Museum on the National Mall. My parents told me I couldn't possibly understand what it meant to have such a prominent Jewish presence on the mall, an acknowledgement that Jews were wholly American. The Jewish story had become, at last, part of the American story. I understood all that, I told them, but I didn't understand why the Holocaust, which happened in Europe, what that had to do with American history, why the museum belonged near the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, the Washington Monument. The mall is symbolic, my father explained. Being on the mall is a symbol that you're truly part of America. I didn't really buy this argument. Why then a Holocaust museum and not a museum of American Jewry? But my parents insisted, although they hadn't seen it themselves, that it would all make sense once I saw the museum in person. So off I went on an outing with my Hebrew school class to take a special tour of the museum, an invitation-only sneak peek the day before it officially opened in April 1993. Mr. Blyer was a survivor of Buchenwald and a member of the museum's advisory committee, and he had pulled a few strings to get tickets for Congregation Beth Shalom's 7th grade class the last year before the kids get bar mitzvahed and drop out of Hebrew school. We would see just what kind of horrible things the Nazis had done. We were 18 students plus 2 teachers and Mr. Blyer, our principal himself. We picked up the metro at Grosvenor, one of the elevated suburban stations on the Red Line, not far from the synagogue. I'd been on the subway plenty of times, visits to the zoo, the Smithsonian, Union Station, but I'd never seen it so crowded on a Sunday morning. And the crowd was unusually lively, chatting excitedly on the platform, waiting for the train downtown. Mr. Blyer herded us into a small group at one end of the platform so that he could keep track of us more easily. "What's going on?" I asked my teacher, pointing to the crowd. "I don't know," she responded. "Cherry Blossom Festival's over. Must be some kind of parade." The lights blinked on the edge of the platform, signaling an approaching train. Mr. Blyer gathered us up in a close group so we could all enter through a single door and rush to claim seats. We were quick, throwing our bodies into the orange and red cushioned seats, pushing each other out of the way to secure spots by the windows. The grown-ups stood next to us in the aisle. Our class staked out a small piece of territory in the rear car, a space big enough for us to tune out the rest of the passengers. Almost. The train was filled to capacity by the time we reached Bethesda. People were crammed shoulder to shoulder in the middle of the car, leaning against the metal doors. But this wasn't a grouchy rush hour scene. People were in high spirits, talking loudly, laughing boisterously, cracking jokes with friends, and greeting strangers with outstretched hands, cooing at babies cowering in strollers, kissing each other on the lips, men and women alike. "Are we going in the right direction?" someone asked. "Honey, we're all going to the same place," came the answer. Many passengers carried placards. I strained to get a look. I saw equal signs, pink triangles, small rainbow flags, but I couldn't read the words. One man standing a few feet away had a sign tucked under his arm at his side. I cocked my head to try to make out the words. He looked down and noticed me and held the sign up, a pink triangle with the slogan, "Silence equals death." I nodded, but I didn't really understand what it meant. The teachers looked uneasy, their eyes watchful of the crowd. The other boys were punching each other and whispering dirty jokes. The girls were the only ones chatting with the other passengers in typically ballsy fashion. "I totally love your earrings," Shira Epstein said to a woman standing nearby. "Thanks, I made them myself," the woman replied, and the ice was broken. "So, where's everyone going?" Shira asked. "Today's the March on Washington," the woman answered, as the woman next to her turned to see who was asking. Shira looked back blankly. "The March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights," the woman's friend clarified. "Oh," said Shira, "cool." She flashed a smile, which was returned in kind. The girl next to Shira giggled as Shira elbowed her and mumbled, "Shut up." A gay march, first I'd heard of it, and the first time I'd seen so many gay people in person. I started scanning the men to see what they looked like. My eyes grazed over a cluster of middle-aged white men with mustaches and bald heads. Half a dozen young black guys in khaki shorts and white tennis shoes, one man in a military uniform, a couple carrying a pair of dachshunds with matching rainbow collars. Then my eyes came to rest on one guy, perhaps 20, wearing a Cornell t-shirt. His dark hair was short and curly, his face freshly shaven, bushy eyebrows capping the retro 60s glasses balanced on his prominent nose. He looked happy. He was among friends, seemed at home in his own skin. Another man a few feet away turned around and caught his eye. "Buck," he called, and the Cornell guy turned to face him. So, his name was Buck. His eyes lit up, his arm reached out, the two men kissed. On the lips, not briefly. I was staring, so were my classmates. Even the boys stopped punching each other. My teacher muttered to herself, "Oh, really, this is too much." Mr. Belier looked over and cleared his throat loudly. The kisser opened his eyes, pulled away from Buck, and said, "We've got an audience." Buck looked over at our group, smiled weakly, then whispered loud enough for us to hear, "So let them watch if they want." I turned away, pretending to stare out the window, but he caught my eye in the reflection. Revelation was instant, unspoken, traveling on invisible radio waves. Buck turned back to the kisser and said, "Some of them should be taking notes." Some of us were. We transferred at Metro Center to the Orange Line, grabbing buddies to stay together. We arrived at the Holocaust Museum to find a completely different crowd, wearing suits instead of t-shirts, solemnly quiet, no signs. Mr. Belier had our tickets ready, and as we walked into the museum, each of us was handed a card representing an actual victim of the Holocaust. We would follow our real-life victim through the events that unfolded for him or her as the timeline of the Holocaust progressed in the exhibit. I got Ruth, a Jewish woman from Vienna. My classmates followed a Catholic priest from Krakow, a Jewish banker from Paris, a gypsy grandfather from Czechoslovakia. Two cards drew the most attention. One, a Jewish teenager from Prague, who could have been any one of us. The other, an artist from Berlin, who sent to Dachau for being homosexual. The latter was dealt to Barry Schwartz, a quiet, nerdy boy I'd known since kindergarten, who had recently grown obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. "Ooh, Barry drew the fag card," shouted one of the boys. "Hey, Barry, is that your new boyfriend?" shouted another. Then came the boys blowing kisses, the girls giggling, the teachers ignoring the whole scene, and me standing in silence. Happy Pride and Shabbat Shalom. And thank you for having me.
Oh no, we want more. Thank you so much for that. I'm looking at people's facial expressions, and I could just imagine what everybody's thinking right now. And just the way you're telling your story, and we really appreciate it. And I cannot wait for Shabbat to be over so I could go buy your book, because I know everybody's thinking the same thing, more. So thank you. And to everybody, I hope, something that stood out to me, by the way, was when, is the way you connected it with the Holocaust to pride, silence equals death. And it's so thought-provoking. So I'm speechless. Congratulations. Not many people can do that and make me speechless. So thank you.
Yes.
Rabbi Hoffman?
Yeah, thank you. You're right. I mean, yes, Wayne does have more claims to fame than being my brother or his brother, right? We have independent existences, but it is a really great book. I think it's available electronically mostly these days, right? Through an electronic version.
Yes, you can, on Amazon, you can find it on Kindle, also as an audiobook. And there are copies available on Amazon in print, although most of them are through third parties, new and used in paperback.
Right. And several members have actually read the book and enjoyed it. They told me they really enjoyed it. And I hope others will avail themselves of the opportunity to read it. And, you know, we live in a very different world than we did in the 80s in a lot of ways. And yeah, and certainly if you go back in the 70s, 60s, even a very, very different world, although today it feels somewhat the same.
Yes.
Right? It has that deja vu all over again feeling. So, and thank you, Wayne. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for the invitation.
And you know, it was really terrific. And I love the book. I did read it a number of years ago. So I hope that everybody will take. And there's a new book coming out, right? On a totally different topic, right?
It's on a very different topic, but also of Jewish interest. Coming out in about a year and a half, will be a book called The End of Her, which is nonfiction. It's a memoir about our great grandmother's murder in 1913. It's the only unsolved murder in Winnipeg that year. She was brutally murdered in her bed in the middle of what they call the Hebrew colony, the Jewish immigrant neighborhood in Winnipeg. It's about that and also about our mother's decline from Alzheimer's and about me trying to solve the mystery of what happened to our great-grandmother before my mother lost the ability to retain that family history. That'll be out in a year and a half, and that's nonfiction.
Can't wait.
Right, and that was something our grandmother, may she rest in peace, used to tell us a lot growing up. She would say her mother, when she was 3, was killed by a sniper. That was her word.
This is a
Sniper.
Bubba Misa. Our Bubba used to tell us a Bubba Misa, which was absolutely not true.
Right, we said.
So it took years of research to find out what really happened, and the truth of it is, and again, this is not a spoiler, is that the story my grandmother told us was entirely wrong and made up, except for one important detail, which is the main central detail, which is that her mother was brutally murdered when she was 3 years old. That's the only part of the story that's true. Everything else she told us was made up. But that part was true. And in fact, the true story is much more horrible than the made up story.
And what is the title? Do you know what's the title?
It's called The End of Her.
The End of Her. That's it. Okay. So, and the fiction book is, right, it's called Sweet Like Sugar. Right.
Sweet Like Sugar. That's out already.
That's out.
Wayne, I have a question for you. I think all of us are somewhat thinking. You grew up in a Jewish world where you were not accepted, as you said, as a bar mitzvah kid, bar mitzvah with a rabbi who you now knew at some point did not accept you, and you were concerned.
Yes.
And your brother became a rabbi down the road. So
yes,
you lived in a Jewish world that you knew did not embrace you, but at some point you reconciled with that, and you found that embrace Jewish feeling at some point later in life. What was that turning point? What did the Jewish world do that brought you back in, or was it you that brought it back in?
It was more me. The difficult part was finding out exactly what it was I wanted to reconnect to, because it was a complicating factor. I wasn't, if I had simply been someone who felt welcomed by the synagogue in every other way, and also felt like I connected through conservative Judaism broadly, and the only outstanding issue was that I was gay, then joining a gay synagogue would have solved the problem. But that wasn't the only issue. And at the point where I was coming out in the 80s, there were gay synagogues, a few, but there was Beit Mishpacha in DC, there was CBST in New York, most importantly, from my life. The trouble was that wasn't how I connected to Jewish life before I came out. And so that also wasn't going to work. A gay version of that wasn't going to work after I came out. And there weren't so many other options. Today, there are a lot of other options, gay Jewish groups. And even a publication like Tablet, I hope, for doing our job, is a Jewish publication where queer people feel like they're part of the conversation. But they should, because we are. But that took a while for me to figure out, what does it mean to reclaim Judaism and Jewishness without necessarily reclaiming Judaism, the most religious aspects, which didn't speak to me. That was much harder. Not that it would have been so easy otherwise, but that was the challenge. So really the turning point was for me, was figuring out what was meaningful. And I'll give you one example. It took a little while after college for me to realize Passover was always a very important holiday to me. I'm not unique in this. It's one of the most important things for most American Jews. One of the points of identification we feel most strongly. And one of the reasons I realized, and it took a while to realize what now seems obvious, is that I connected to it because it was an observance that was customizable, that you did yourself at home and you could change. You could, no two people had the same Seder. And also it was something we did at home and that we led ourselves. And once I realized that's the part I liked, I realized, oh, there are other holidays that also involve staying at home that do speak to me. So Hanukkah was one that came back. Purim observance, not necessarily going to hear the Megillah, but the Hamantash and reading the story, the Book of Esther, which as an atheist is a great book, a great story, because God's not mentioned in the Book of Esther, so it's very easy to relate to as an atheist. So it was a matter of finding the points of connection and then also realizing the other parts about the arts and culture and politics and Zionism and the parts that I still did relate to, and realizing I don't have to fit someone else's definition of Judaism. I have my own, and I can live my life Jewishly in the way that feels authentic to me. But it's not so easy. It's sort of working without a script because the scripts didn't speak to me. So I eventually wrote my own.
Thank you very much. That's very inspiring.
By the way, we had a question which I saw go across my screen, Wayne. If you would take some more questions after the davening, is that all right?
When is that?
We'll be done in a half an hour's time.
Sure.
Okay, there you go. Harry, your question is answered. Because Harry asked the question in the, whatever you call that thing on the bottom. So yes, so that, thank you. Yeah, there are a few people who want to ask, I guess longer questions. And by the way, before we finish with the Kaddish, I have one little piece I'm going to add. The JCRC, we could not have known this in the planning stages, right, has asked all the synagogues to recognize not only Pride, Shabbat at some point in the month, which we chose, but also Solidarity Shabbat. And I have a little something I'll share before the end, but I want us to go forward and you'll see why I chose a little bit different spot to share very, very briefly. So, again, thank you to Wayne. Thank you to Heidi and Wendy for your organization. And we're going to continue in just a moment with Half Kaddish, with the Chatzi Kaddish preceding Musaf Amida. And that's in your books on page 100. And I think I know the pages by now. 184, and then the Amida is 185.
428 Nasim Shalom.
יתקדש שמי רבה, אלמה דברה קירותי וימלך מלכותי, בחייכון ובימיכון, ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, העגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן, יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפואר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלש מקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בלמם יאמרו אמן.
185 is the Amida in Left Shore.
אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, בחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי ידום מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני בחיי המתים.
87 Leif Shulman.
אריצך ונקישך, כסוד שיח שרפי קודש, המקדישים שמך בקודש, ככתוב על יד נביאך, יקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם, מלא עולם, כבודו מלא עולם, מלא עולם, בשאר תשאלים זה לזה, חיי מקום כבודו, בשאר תשאלים זה לזה, חיי מקום כבודו, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומו הוא ייתן, הוא ייתן, הוא ייתן ברחמים, ויחונם המייחדים, המייחדים שמו, ערב בבוקר בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים באהבה, שמו אומרים, שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו, ישמיענו ברחמיו, שנית, 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 שנית לעיני כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקיש. בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Okay, as you complete the immediate can be seated, we're continuing the full Reader's Kaddish. It's 203 if you have Leib Shalom.
And Sim Shalom is 506.
יתקרא ויקרא שמי רבה, ועלמא דברה קירותי וימלך מלכותי בחייכון וימכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל. הגרלו בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן, יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם לעלמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומה ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה. ברכו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירון ויאמר ויאמרו אמן. תקבל צלותנו וברכותנו כל ישראל כל אדם ובהוני בשמיא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ויאמרו Amen.
Okay, the closing service beginning on 204 is Ein Keloheinu.
508.
Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mich Eloheinu, Mich Adonenu, Mich Malkeinu, Mich Moshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shektiru Avotenu, Lefanecha et Ketoret Hasamim.
Ask everyone to please rise. The Aleinu is on page 205 in the Leib Shalom book.
And 510 in the Sim Shalom.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת זו יקובע מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום בהשיבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת. אין עוד, כן דבר כאן מזכר להעביר גלים ונראה צקרית ולתקן ולמלכות שלה בכל בית עצה בשמך לפנתנו לכל שיכול שביתנו, כי לך תקרא כל ברבה כל השול לבנך אדוני להן יקרו יפולו ולכבוד שמך יקריתנו כולנו ותחתים לך להם נראה לעולם, כי המלכות שלך היא עולמת תמלוך בכבוד. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני echad, u'shemo echad, u'shemo echad.
Okay, the Mourner's Kaddish for those in the year of mourning or observing Yortzeit is found on 207. And this week, I'm going to read through the list of Yortzeits for this past week, and especially those which are being observed today, this Shabbat. So this past week, we observed the following Yortzeits: Gertrude Marcus, Bernard Rudy, Edith Goldman, Jenny Migdal, Lillian Zemmel, Maxine Hoffberg, Harold Brody, Harold Rothkopf, Harry Ginsberg, Jenny Wagner, Lena Goranzik, Lenora Cooper, Michael Wertlieb, Rose Arnowitz, Jake Wender Milliner, Joseph Levy, Maurice Berg, Richard Jacob, Samuel Israel, Sonia Sharoff, Alice Bernstein, Goldie Boson, Jacques Benoit, Jay Salins, Pauline Seidel, Rose Myers, Pesha Miriam Rosenheim, Rose Eisenstadt, Rose D. Goldberg, Sarah Simon, and the following are the Yortzeits for today, the 14th day of Sivan. Gladys Kaufman, mother of Philip Kaufman, Harold Katkoff, father of Ben Katkoff, Howard Berger, brother-in-law Wallace Bloom, Joe Sherry, remembered by David and Joanne Silberstein, Shirley Rothkopf, mother of Lisa Feldman. Others? Any others? Okay. Say again, I'm sorry.
Moberg.
Okay, thank you. I'll have to check our list. Okay, again, Mourner's Kaddish 207, right? Yit Gadal, Yit Gadal, Ahmad, Ra,
Malchute, V'chayei Yomekon, V'chayei Jacob, Israel,
Isman Kareem, Amen.
Yisbora, Yishaba, Yisbaar, Yisramam, Yisrasem, Yissadar, Yisalev, Yisalom, Shabari, Le'elamim,
Shirata,
Amen. Yehesh Shlomo Amin Shemaya V'Hayim Alenu Galpo Yisrael Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Merav V'Ya'aseh Amen.
Amen. Rabbi, were you going to share a poem?
Yes, I am. I'm going to share something with you, and it's original, though it's not, my day job per se. But this past week is been a very difficult and challenging week. A lot of things very difficult to watch. Right, as Paul Simon once said, everything looks worse in black and white or on video, right? It looks worse in reality. And I was reminded of a poem. It's probably the most famous poem in the history of the modern Hebrew language, right? Arguably it is. And it's called Al Hashchita, concerning the slaughter, or upon the slaughter, something like that. And it was written by Chaim Nachman Bialik. And Bialik was born 1873. So when he was 30, there was a pogrom in Kishinev, and they killed 50 people. And this was a great shock to the Jewish world, not because they never seen a pogrom, but first of all, this one was a little bit larger. The brutality was worse. And I think most important, the governments usually looked the other way, but they didn't perpetrate the violence. They just looked the other way and didn't protect Jews. This time they materially abetted and participated in those events. And that was a great shock. The only parallel I can give you is, the Tree of Life Synagogue, right? Jews have been killed in anti-Semitic incidents here and there in American history, but we thought, synagogues with police officers in front was, in Europe and other parts of the world, not in the United States of America in the 21st century. And we found out very graphically that that wasn't really the case, and it shook us a great deal. So this was the case in Kishinev in 1903, and Bialik was sent. He was already something of a young established writer, sent to interview the victims, the survivors of the victim, their families, and also other survivors. And he penned actually 2 poems on that. The longer version is called Ir HaRegah, the city of killing, or something like that, the city of murder. And the shorter version, and probably the better known, is Al Ashkita, is on the slaughter. So we studied this in thinking Jewishly, and I asked, if literature is great, it stands above time. It stands above time. It can be recast so many ways, right? That's why we have Romeo and Juliet was recast as West Side Story, right? We mentioned La Boheme was recast as Rent. Taming of the Shrew was recast as Kiss Me Kate. You can think of what's it called? Apocalypse Now is a Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad. You can go. The list goes on and on and on and on. So I asked, could we recast Al Ashkita? Can you recast On the Slaughter to address the events of Black America in the 21st century? And everybody said yes. I think Al Temin said, James Baldwin could have written something like that. Sure. Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote Between the World and Me, yes. So I said, let me take a shot at it. Let me take a shot. Let me rewrite in the English language a sort of 21st century version of Al Ashkita, the original. It's a short poem. And I tried to keep the framework of the poem the same, but the words are, of course, have to be different. And the tone, I think, I tried to preserve. So here's my composition in memory of the 3 victims who were primarily being remembered, right? Taylor, Floyd, and Arbery. Land, pray for me. If there is liberty within you and a path to justice for all in one nation under God, and I have not found it, pray for me. As for me, there's no pledge in my heart or anthem upon my lips. I kneel in despair, hopeless, slavery, segregation. How long? Chauvin, here's my neck. Kneel down and slaughter me. Break my neck like a dog's, you've badge and baton. My world's a prison, and we're the voiceless. Our blood's permitted. Smash our heads. Let the blood of martyrs flow like a mighty stream through urban streets, its stain to never be cleansed. If there's justice, justice now. But if the dream be deferred and my eyes not behold its coming, then may the pillars of oppression be toppled and the high places of white supremacy cast into a pit. And cursed be the one who says destroy. Will the victims be avenged by gold and silver and jewels? Vengeance for them even Satan has not yet devised. May their blood pierce the nation's soul. May it seep down to society's foundation, and there eat away in the darkness the cancer of silent indifference. Okay, that's my attempt. Okay. Anyway, I hope everybody will remember the victims in his or her own way and think a lot about social justice. It's got a long way to go. Okay, we have our announcements for the coming week. Fred, do you have them?
I do, but it's pretty hard to follow that, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Shabbat shalom to all. We'd like to really thank Wayne Hoffman for coming today and really sharing us your words and your experiences. And this goes without saying, Wayne, you're always invited to B'nai Shalom, despite that your brother's here. So we'd love to see you anytime you'd like to join us. So thank you very much. We hope you stay for some questions after. Also, a special Yasha Koach to Gabrielle Friedman for reading Torah today on her anniversary for Bat Mitzvah. So great. And thanks to all the Torah readers. I know it was Todd and Ed and Noreen. I hope I'm not missing anyone, but thanks everyone for participating. Tonight, we have our BSO Community Havdalah. It starts around 9:20. It'll be led by the Leventhal family. So please join us. Everyone's welcome. It's really short and it's a lot of fun. Also want to say thanks for everyone who came to the Car-E Safari in our parking lot last Sunday, which was actually Sunday and Monday. We had, I think, over 300 cars, and it was an amazing community event. It was a lot of fun. The Hazak is having a meeting on June 9th at 11 a.m., sharing memories of the 6-day war. The ECS on June 10th is having an ECS Siyum at 4 p.m. via Zoom with a closing celebration on a drive-through in the BSO parking lot. High Holidays survey email went out the other day, I think yesterday. Please be sure to fill out the survey and respond before June 11th. That's very important. And also, we have our congregational meeting on June 14th at 10 a.m. in the morning. Please come. It'll be our first congregational Zoom meeting. We'll be voting via Zoom, so it should be quite interesting. And also, we have our BSO drive-in movie featuring The Goonies at 8:30 p.m. on Sunday, June 14th as well. And then on popular demand, back is Stan Dubin, who will be holding a cooking class at the Grill on June 15th. So it'll be a second cooking class, so we appreciate that. And that's all I have. Shabbat Shalom.
Next Shabbat, don't forget the bar mitzvah of Zachary Harris.
Zachary Harris.
Right. Broadcast live from Georgia Avenue, right, from the home, just like the
We're good at it, Rabbi. We're getting good at it.
Okay. We're going to conclude officially with Don Alum 211 and then the Kiddush. And my brother Wayne's been kind enough to stay and take questions, so you don't have to leave. And thanks everybody for coming. Thanks to Wayne for sharing, and thanks to our participants. And let's go.
Screen sharing has been disabled, so I apologize. And here's Adon Olam. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'ed nasa b'chefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra v'yacharei kichlot hakol Levado yimlach nora, vehu haya, vehu hove, vehu yeh, betifara, vehu echad, v'ein sheni, lehamshilo, lehachbira, Bali reshit, bali tachlit, velo haoz v'ham Yisrael, v'hu eli, v'chai goali, v'tzurech li b'yetzara, v'hu nisi, umanos li, menat posi, b'yom ekra b'yado, Hafkid ruchi, b'yedi shan be'ayira, ve'im ruchi, yeviati, Adonai li, ve'lo ira. Al kain berach Adonai et yom ha'shabbat v'yikareshehu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Okay, so anyone who wants to ask questions, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, I have a comment, a question.
Go ahead.
So my comment is, in 1944, that was my first season as a camper at Habonim Camp Moshava. And in that year, I had no idea what a gay person was. I did not have any encounter with the concept of a gay person until my freshman year in high school, which was the next year, where there were a few gay boys in an all-male high school. So getting back to Moshava, growing up as a labor Zionist in Baltimore, and by the way, there are other members of B'nai Shalom who were members of Habonim and went to Habonim Camp Moshava. I'm not the only one. So I was wondering, when you were at Moshava, did your fellow campers know that you were gay? And if they did, how did they respond to that?
You know, it's a very good question, and I appreciate it. I actually wrote a story about this in part for Tablet. I'll post the link in the comments in a moment. So I went to Moshava from 1981 to 1984. Those were the sort of, this might be inside baseball for those of you who aren't Habonimniks, but there was an interim period between campsites, between the old site in Annapolis and the current site in Street, Maryland, when Moshava was located in Buffalo Gap, West Virginia, and Cape and Bridge, West Virginia, just for 5 summers, I think. And that happens to be exactly when I went. And as I mentioned, I had difficulty finding the places where I really felt I could connect to Judaism in a way that felt right to me. And Habonim was one of them. As a young teenager, Habonim felt right to me. It proudly embraced kind of oddballs. It wasn't too heavy on religion. It was Zionist, but not right wing. It was sort of all the things I really, really appreciated. And I felt like I belonged in Habonim. And then I became an older teenager, and all the other kids they became adolescents. And all of a sudden, sexuality was a very big part of everyone's lives, which it wasn't when we were 10, but it was when we were 14.
Right.
And there came a summer where that became, as it does with most camps and most schools, it came a time when the bulk of the attention was on flirtation and hooking up. And all of a sudden I found myself left out. And I didn't tell anybody why, but I just left. I sort of vanished. And looking back, in some ways, I'm sorry that I did vanish, because it seems like a lot of people from Mosh and a lot of people from summer camps in general, but I can speak about Mosh, they formed lifelong connections to each other right around the time I left. So to me, I look back on Mosh as a few years of my childhood that was a long time ago. And to people who stayed just a couple of years longer, they're still their friends on an ongoing basis. And I left right before that happened. But I did because I hit a point that summer, in the summer when I was 13 years old, where I realized, oh, this isn't going to work anymore. The place I thought was the place for me isn't the place for me. I couldn't figure out how to be gay in that space. It wasn't going to work. There's an incident that happened at camp that summer, which I fictionalized in Sweet Like Sugar, that made it clear to me that this was not a place I could come out. I think that would be different today. From what I hear from Moshniks and Habonimniks today, it would be different today, but it wasn't different then. It wasn't different when it mattered to me, and so I left.
Well said. Thank you for that.
It's even though I'm your brother, I get a comment, right?
Yes.
It's worth noting, that I mean, my undergraduate years at Penn were from 82 to 85, and there were occasional. They they weren't really called gay pride events. I don't remember exactly what they were called. Maybe they were called that. I don't think it was, the nomenclature was different. I don't recall what it was. It's just too far back. But I mean, I remember, and I won't say it was, I don't think it matters anymore, but when I was a Penn undergraduate, you know, that somebody came out, you know, publicly, like in the Daily Pennsylvanian, you know, came out as gay, somebody who I was in AZA with. And he was a little bit ahead of me at Penn. And I remember being so surprised and almost not taken aback, but, you know, I think a lot of us surprised. Oh, I don't think we had a problem with it. I just think we were surprised because nobody knew the extent.
Sometimes the issue or the stigma or the bump in the road doesn't present itself immediately, which is a complicating factor for people's friendships. I don't mean their dating relationships, I mean their friendships, particularly for non-queer people and their friendships with queer people. And I'll give you an example. When I went to Tufts in '87, I was roomed up, as most first-year students are, I was roomed up randomly with a random person. His name is Dan Rosner. And we were very different, but we became friends, and I came out in a very big way. And the people in my dorm were very nice, and I was good friends with a lot of them, and he was good friends with a lot of them. He's a very sociable straight guy. And I knew what I was going through. I didn't know what he was going through as a straight man, rooming with a gay guy. And the answer is, people in our dorm, they liked him first year, and they had no problem with the fact that he had a gay roommate, me, because we were paired together randomly. Sophomore year, we chose to live together again because we became good friends. And at that point, I didn't know this for quite some time. At that point, a lot of the people in our dorm who knew me and liked me, they came up to him and said, "Why are you living with a gay guy on purpose?" Like, it was one thing when you got paired up randomly, and Wayne seemed perfectly fine, but I don't know why you would deliberately, knowingly live with a gay guy, like in the same room. That he didn't see coming. And actually, when I was editing a column for our campus paper, then I had him write a story about what it was like to be a gay guy's straight roommate. So I think a lot of times the conflicts that come up don't come up where we think they're going to, but it doesn't mean they're not coming later.
Yeah.
This is Lisa Siegel. As a follow-up to that, within the Hoffman family, how did the dynamics change as you came out? You know, with your parents, your brother, and so forth.
So, well, let's see how much tea we should spill. So I'm the youngest. Scott is 7 years older, and in between us is our sister Stacy. So really, when Scott left home for college, I was only 11. I was a kid. But Stacy and I were together for a couple more years, and also Stacy and I went to Moshe together. We went to summer camp together. We were in Israeli dance together. So Stacy and I not only were still in the house, we also overlapped socially, and our crowds overlapped socially, and we listened to the same music. So we sort of had our own connection after Scott was gone. And so I came out to Stacy first. I came out to Stacy when I was in high school. I came out to Scott when I went to college. And I came out to my parents after first year. My parents were really the last. I saved it for last. I think a lot of people do, for various reasons. What dynamics did it change? I think certainly, I don't think there were any difficulties unless I'm repressing them in the long run. In the short term, there were more conversations than there had been. And it's certainly, in terms of my relationship with my parents, I'm going to speak gingerly because one of them is on this call right now. What intrigued me was how each of my parents related or found a point of connection to understand gay issues. And they related differently. My mother got it on a personal level first. She understood the question of relationships and dating And that was her concern. I don't want you to be alone. Don't worry, I'm not alone. I'm worried that you'll be beaten up, which didn't happen. She was worried about AIDS, which I was too. She was worried about the personal. And my father's point of connection that I first saw when it sort of clicked in his mind was on a much more, on a communal and political level. That once we started talking about gay rights and gay political issues and gay civil rights and demonstrations, my father got that immediately. And once we talked about the gay community on a communal level, my father got that immediately because that's how he relates to the Jewish community. He's always been a community-minded man, and which is one of the things I hope I've taken from him, that he instilled in us, was sort of to think of things in communal ways and to think of the group as opposed to just yourself. So for each of them, I think there was a pause when they tried to understand how they could connect. And I'll give you one specific example. At the end of my freshman year of college, I came home, and that's when I came out to my parents. And this is 1988. Again, a terrible time in the AIDS crisis. In 1988, the Washington Post ran a terrible column. They ran a lot of terrible columns by James Kilpatrick. And believe it or not, this was a real thing, where he was suggesting that people with AIDS should be tattooed and placed on an island somewhere. And an island, he didn't mean Manhattan. He meant an island far away. And I wrote a letter to the editor in response, but it was the day before I was leaving to go back to school for my sophomore year. I was already out. I'd been on television. I'd been writing for the newspaper. I'd been on the radio. I didn't care. Everyone I needed to know knew. But for my parents, they had only just found out, and they had their own coming out process to go through. And publishing a letter in the Washington Post would basically have been them coming out to all of their friends in a minute. So I left the letter on my parents' bed and said, look, I'm fine with publishing this, but it's up to you. If you're fine with it, please mail it in. In those days, it was mail. And if not, it's no problem. Just let me know. And my mother called me when I got back to school in Boston. And she said, we're not ready yet, but we will be. Just give us time. And by the next summer, it was my mother who suggested, when I was having difficulty in college, it was my mother who suggested that I take time off and go lobby on Capitol Hill for a gay rights group. That was her idea, not mine. So, you know, I had my own coming out process, but my parents did too. I'm sure my brother and sister did too, probably in a more condensed way. But it's not just about you, it's about the people around you too and what they go through.
We had a question in the chat box. Was it Stan and Venla had a question, I think?
I have a comment. My father and my grandfather and my uncles came from Russia, and we were kissers. All the men always kissed each other at every holiday celebration. That was accepted. So I grew up, you know, kissing my uncles and my dad and my grandpa. It was no big deal.
Yeah, it's worth noting, Harry, what you shared with me the other week. You know, your son, Oren, is a medical researcher, right?
Right.
And worked with, as a much younger, when they were both younger men, because your son's a few years my senior, with a guy named Tony Fauci, who was sort of connected to the AIDS crisis.
That's right. Oren worked for Tony Fauci for 10 years. And as a matter of fact, he just got an email from Tony Fauci the other day because Oren had written a paper and he sent it to Tony to get his comments, and he got an answer back. But when Oren was in high school, at Northwood High School, his best friend came out of the closet. His best friend was gay, and his best friend's parents spent years grappling with that and trying to come to terms with that and trying to accept it. It was very difficult for his parents.
I see there's a question in the...
Yeah, Venla, go ahead, Venla.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any real life talks, discussions with Orthodox Jews that were actually awake and talking with you, that were meaningful for you in real life.
Yeah, I find most of the talks I've had that are most meaningful are with people who are awake. It's usually better, though not always. Yes, and actually, I'll tell you how. It's really been through writing and through work as a journalist, and meaningful, both positive and negative. I'll give you an example of each. So when I was at the Forward, as I mentioned, in case you don't know, the Forward is a left-leaning publication, sometimes further left than others, but it leans left. In the interest of having some kind of diversity of voices, we also had the occasional conservative op-ed writer, and one of our regulars, this is back 15, 20 years ago, was a man named David Klinghoffer, who was an Orthodox man and conservative, which is fine. I'm fine disagreeing with people. I'm fine publishing people whose ideas I disagree with. I do it literally every day. But Klinghoffer had published a piece, this is in 2004, let's say, or 2005, slamming gay marriage, which is his prerogative. He can be against it. It's fine. I mean, I have problems with it, but he's entitled to that opinion. But it was so sort of belittling and casual, as though it were just no big deal to deny someone their civil rights. Like, he's just like, oh, well, who cares? I don't want to be made uncomfortable by you having civil rights. And what's the big deal if someone calls your spouse or not? It just doesn't matter. And I wrote him back, which I typically didn't. I wrote him back and said, you can think however you want, but please don't be dismissive of actual big deals, because this is an actual big deal. And if you're going to disagree, at least disagree honestly, because now you're being disingenuous. And we had a back and forth. It was pretty heated. And we wound up publishing it as a back and forth, which I'm glad we did. So that was an interaction, started off as sort of a heated negative thing, an argument that turned into, I think, a pretty good piece of journalism. Once I got to Tablet, one of the things I do at Tablet, everyone has their own sort of fiefdom. And one of the fiefs I tend to oversee are personal essays. And a lot of those personal essays, let's say at least half of them, are written by Orthodox Jews of various stripes. And I'm the person who fields those essays and works through them with the writers. And they're often, I find, the most rewarding to work through. And I'll tell you the reason why, and also the reason why I find that our essays by Orthodox Jews are so popular with non-Orthodox Jews. It's because, well, first of all, I don't run opinion essays. I'm not, so what I tell people is I never want to read another should story. I got enough of what I should and shouldn't do growing up, and I don't need any more should and shouldn'ts. I'm an adult now. Just tell me what you think and why, and I'll either agree or disagree, but don't tell me what I should think. Tell me what you think and why. So we have a lot of Orthodox Jews, and what they do is they walk, when they're pressed, they'll walk through their decision-making about how they reconcile their beliefs and their behaviors and their observance with their conflicting beliefs, especially Orthodox women, how they reconcile their own sense of what feminism means with what, let's say, tznius or modesty means, is a very popular topic. What it means to be modest and observant and yet also have a sense of yourself as a woman that might clash with orthodoxy. One of the reasons I find it so enriching and such a positive experience is because oftentimes as non-Orthodox Jews, we step back and think, whether you approve or disapprove of what Orthodox Jews are doing, we think they must feel so certain about what they're doing, that they've got it all figured out for themselves, and that they don't have moments of doubt. When in reality, Orthodox Jews are just like everybody. They have constant doubt. They're constantly wrestling with things. And I like to try to give people some insight into what that can be. And over the years, I've built up relationships with a lot of Orthodox writers, and we wind up talking about lots of things, because you can't know me for more than 2 minutes, whether you're my friend or my editor or a stranger on the street, without knowing that I'm a big old queer. It's not a secret. So the discussions I have with Orthodox Haredi Jews are often fascinating and almost entirely positive. And that's been for the past decade. It's been remarkable.
You got a shout out from Cindy Schumann, by the way. She thanked you, Wayne. So
thank you, Cindy.
Right. We know, having grown up here, we know all these people, right? We know all this.
Yeah, I mean, I see some familiar names in Zoom windows, yes.
Yes, that's it. So that's it. Her husband Andy went to school with Phyllis at Hartford, and before that, his twin sister was at Stacy's bat mitzvah. We have the photo to prove it. So,
are we going to play the Jewish name game now? Shall we go through and see how many degrees separated we are from everybody on this
yeah,
list?
it's going to be. It'll take all day, so we shouldn't do that. Any last questions or comments? Anybody else? Just unmute yourself.
I just want to say again, Wayne, thanks for coming. And I think that, you have some very unique experiences and earlier challenges with the Jewish community. And I think what's interesting, where my mind goes to is we have a new generation that also struggles with the Jewish community. And not because they're gay or this or that, because we're trying to find ways to accept, and we should find ways to accept everybody, wherever they're coming from and how they're coming in to have Jewish experiences. And as you said earlier, you had to find a way to live Jewishly that meant something to you. And I think as a synagogue, we're very much aware of that today. And we're all trying very hard and for all the right reasons to help people live Jewishly the way they want to. Not the way we want them to, but the way that they want to. And that we find ways to support it and build the community around it. So I think that you help accent that for all of us in that way.
I want to thank you for that, and I want to bring up one point. So when Sweet Like Sugar first came out, I wound up doing. It's purely coincidence. I wound up doing an event at Temple Bethel in New Rochelle, New York. They invited me to come speak, not realizing I'd been to Temple Bethel in New Rochelle before because Scott used to be the assistant rabbi at that congregation. They hadn't connected those two dots, that I'd actually been there. I think my second nephew, Briss, was there.
It was, yeah.
I'm remembering which one it was. It was number 2, yeah. It's been a few years. So they'd invited me, and I went to the synagogue, a conservative synagogue, and I didn't realize that they had been in the middle of a very long and contentious process that I didn't know. Basically, I was walking into a minefield, and I didn't realize I was. And here's how I found out. Someone asked me a question. So there were adults in the room, the high school students were also in the room, the rabbis were there. And one of the adults asked a question, which I didn't realize how loaded it was. And the question was, what percentage of people are gay? First of all, there's no answer to this question. And I also don't know why we're asking this question, but okay, I tried to, fudge a response. Is it 2%? Is it 4%? Is it 10%? How are we defining gay? Are we talking about queer people more broadly? What does it mean? Are we talking about behavior or identity? What study are we trusting? There's no way to know. Anyway, what does it matter? What percentage of people are Jewish? It's very small. That's not the point. But then someone else stood up and said, wait, I'm going to tell you what that person's really asking. They said that person is, what they're really trying to say is hardly anyone's gay, so why is this such a big deal? And I said, oh, then let's ask the other question. What percentage of Jews know someone who's LGBT? Close to 100%. So that's why it's a big deal. Because it doesn't matter if you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender or non-binary or what have you. The issue is queer people are a part of our community, and we all know queer people. And so it's not an issue for a tiny, tiny, tiny minority. It's an issue for everybody in the community. And the synagogue there had been going through a year-long process. This is what I was unaware of, where they were trying to decide, would they be a, quote, welcoming synagogue? And the answer they had come up with after a year of discussion and a year of speakers was, yes, we will. We will be open to queer people. Then came the trouble. Half the congregation decided that was the end, that they made the decision that they would be welcoming, and that was the last word. And the other half said, in my opinion correctly, that's the beginning of the discussion. That's not the end. Because the questions that came that were related to that issue that came to me during that talk were things like, Do we need to say we're a welcoming congregation? Do we need to make it public somewhere? Do we need to talk about it? We already talked about it. And the answer was, for me, yes. Sorry, you do need to keep talking about it. And the reason you do is twofold. One is that you can't assume, people need to know where it is they can go. If they're looking for a welcoming space, they need to know where a welcoming space is. But specifically to go to the conservative movement that I grew up in, there was a time, and it wasn't so long ago, I'm not so old, when the conservative movement was very much not a welcoming place. And so until you hear clearly otherwise, for a lot of gay people, we'll assume that the answer hasn't changed. So yes, the answer has changed. That's the good news. The answer has changed. But yes, you have to shout that from the rooftops or people won't know it. And the default assumption will be that it hasn't changed. So yes, it's important that things have changed. It's also important to keep talking about it because the change is not the end of the discussion. The change is the beginning of the new reality to move forward. I'll also say, just FYI, I just posted a link in the comments to the story I was talking about earlier about my summer at Mosheva when sort of everything changed. And it's a very quick story at 600 words. But if that's of interest to you, I've linked to that in the comments.
By the way, Wayne, you should know that Cantor Geller grew up in Congregation Bethel in New Rochelle. Her parents
There you go, see?
when I was there. And she can tell you all about how quickly things change in Bethel and New Rochelle, right? Because they were very quick to change with women. It only took a few decades to change over, right?
Well, this is part of the difficulty. I think, look, I have one foot in the gay community, one foot in the Jewish community, and time is completely different in the two. The gay community is very focused on the now, and it's always very present-minded, and time moves quickly. And the Jewish world is very focused on both the past and the future, less on the present, but lots of past and lots of future, and time is expressed in millennia, not weeks, but millennia. And I noticed this actually after Sweet Like Sugar came out. I also went and spoke at Share Tefillah. I spoke with Jonah Lehman, invited me to come speak on Georgia Avenue, and I did. And the conservative movement has changed. The conservative movement's made great changes. But the timing varies depending on how you look at this. Because on the one hand, the speed with which the conservative movement changed was incredibly fast. It was lightning fast. It was only decades. In millennia of Jewish history, decades is a very, very short amount of time for rulings and interpretations to change dramatically. That's very fast change. On the other hand, in the lifespan of a human, decades is a very long time. It's a very long time to wait to find out that you've been accepted by your congregation or that your marriage is recognized or that your children will be welcome. The same is true, we're still going through things around women, around people of color, around converts, around interfaith families, and still around queer people. The changes that happen that seem so quick in terms of Jewish history can actually be too slow in terms of lived human experience for someone to wait around waiting for it to change. And we have to think of those two things simultaneously. In a person's life, waiting 25 years for your marriage to be recognized or your relationship to be validated, that's a very long time to wait.
Having kind of grown up in Shara Tefillah, I'm probably 6, 7, 8 years ahead of you. I can tell you my bat mitzvah in an Orthodox synagogue on Long Island was more progressive than my sister's bat mitzvah 5 years after mine at Shara Tefillah. So Shara Tefillah was very, very conservative.
Yes.
And I don't know if this helps, but I don't think you were singled out because I think that was most of our experience growing up in Nashville.
Absolutely, I was definitely not singled out. I mean, it was the only difference is, so I was bar mitzvah in 1983, my brother in 77, and our sister in 1980. So in 1980, when our sister was bar mitzvah, girls were still not reading from the Torah.
Right.
Wasn't a thing. By the time I was bar mitzvah, only 3 years later, girls were allowed. It was a choice. You could either do a Friday night bat mitzvah without Torah reading or Saturday morning with Torah reading. It was your choice. That was sort of the pivot point, was right when I was turning 13. So when my sister was bat mitzvah, it wasn't even an option. The only difference was no one looked around and wondered if my sister existed or was a girl. They knew that she was there, and they knew that she had second-class status. But at least and this is not to say that she had a great situation. She was a second-class citizen, and it was publicly known, and also she was there. Gay people were not coming out. They were hiding or leaving because of their status. There was no way to do it. And coming out is something that it's not entirely unique to queer people, but it does set our experiences apart from certain other minorities. And it's both easier in some ways and harder in some ways. This isn't a question of comparing. It's no victim Olympics here, but there is a difference. My sister, as a girl, no one thought she was a boy. But as a gay man, the question was, as soon as we find out, you're out of here. And so we better not find out. So for many years, the illusion was that there were no gay people in synagogues. There were, but the illusion was that there were not.
By the way, Wayne, just to clarify, you're speaking to Melanie Center Lubin, whose sister went to school with Stacy. So
I would like to just add how important it is to continue talking about it. I mean, yes, we have Pride Month and Pride Parades and Pride Shabbats and all these wonderful things. However, still the greatest, I don't mean to be a downer, but this is the truth, the greatest amount of suicides in teenagers are because they are LGBTQ. So we do need to, as much as the world is changing, there's still a whole lot that people need to learn about and understand and start to accept. And that's why we really do need to continue talking about it no matter what celebrations there are.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the big things that's changed since I came out in the old days when we lived in caves is that with the internet, you don't have to wait for me to come speak to hear from a queer person. If you need an answer to a question, you can find it anytime online, on your phone or on a computer. You can find a resource, you can find a group, you can find answers to a question, you can find a book to read, a pamphlet to read, an expert to contact. You can find those things online. And there are resources for queer teens, as well as any kind of suicide prevention hotline, mental health. All those things are at least available. You still have to look for them. They don't knock on your door. They don't text you, but they do exist.
Okay.
I'm looking at some of the comments. Yes, looking at the AIDS floors in hospitals. Where I live in New York City, I live in the West Village, a block from the Stonewall, and 3 minutes away from what used to be St. Vincent's Hospital, which is one of the hardest hit AIDS wards in the country. St. Vincent's is now gone. Like everything else in New York, it was torn down to build luxury condos. But there's now an AIDS Memorial Park on part of where St. Vincent's used to stand. And yes, it's remarkable to see how much things have changed. And it's,
are you going outside?
Again, it's hard to think about how
Tell them I'll be out as soon as I could.
works for different people. But to say something happened 30 years ago seems, for those of us who are, I'm going to be 50 this year, to say something happened 30 years ago seems like not that long ago. But if you're 30, it was your lifetime ago. And so that's why it's our responsibility to keep talking about these things, and not just talk about the present, but to talk about the past. And this isn't just true of gay people, it's true of all of us, except Jews are, I think, really particularly good at talking about the past, to pass things down. And the reason it's particularly difficult for LGBT people is often we come from families where we didn't have LGBT parents. So the things that our parents have passed down to us about Jewish history and Jewish community and Jewish culture and sort of the linear nature of Jewish history, that hasn't happened for most LGBT people. What it means is that most people, when they come out, have to find that history themselves. Some never do. But it also means that for non-gay people, you also have to seek it out because it doesn't just come to you. As much as I had to learn about Stonewall, and as much as I know about the AIDS crisis because I lived through it, I don't expect that people, even people who are my age who weren't gay, might not remember or have ever known what was happening in St. Vincent or in the general medicine ward at Georgetown University Hospital in 1986. So it's important that we talk about these things because people don't know otherwise. They don't know. Probably your parents aren't telling you, and you might not be telling your kids.
Wayne, a question. Mayor Pete this year did well and didn't seem to face discrimination, at least on the Democratic side. If he had won the nomination, he probably didn't because he was young and not well known. If he had won the nomination, what do you think would have happened in the general election? And maybe it would be a good fictional book too.
Probably would be. Mayor Pete, I think someday we'll look back on him as, and maybe he will also be the person 20 years from now who does win and becomes the Barack Obama who breaks the barrier. But at the moment, I think he's more of, let's say, the Jesse Jackson figure of someone in terms of presidential politics, someone who ran for the nomination, was clearly not going to win in 1984, but did surprisingly well and showed that it was possible. He was never going to win, but he showed that it was possible and that the resistance was at least vocally and outwardly less than feared. So where would that have gone had he won the nomination? Would we have seen a horrible explosion of homophobia in the general election? Yes, almost certainly. The difference being, and we saw this during the gay marriage debates in this country, one of the things that changed people's minds, and this is not true across different oppressions, but it is often true in America today around gay issues, is that you have people who are very invested in this issue on both sides, people who are extremely homophobic and people who are very progressive or queer themselves. You have a vast middle ground of people who may lean one way or the other, but it's not the most important thing and they don't really care about it all that much. What we saw during the gay marriage debate was that one thing those people in the middle really didn't want to be associated with was bigotry. They really didn't want that. And my mantra during those years when we were fighting for marriage equality was often hand them the mic, give our opponents the microphone, let them talk. The more they talk, the more the middle is alienated. Let them talk. They're winning my debate for me. I think it's not so much that people are motivated by being progressive and open-hearted and broad-minded, but a lot of people are motivated by not being monstrous bigots and closed-minded and, frankly, cruel. That's a turnoff for a lot of people. So I wonder if, had Mayor Pete gone further and gotten the nomination, we would have seen something similar play out, where, yes, you would have certainly have seen an explosion of homophobia in public discourse. It's unavoidable. But I think you would have also seen pushback against that grow. That's where the needle moves, is when the pushback grows and the people in the middle, again, not necessarily people who don't have feelings one way or the other, but people for whom they're not going to go to the mat over this issue. They will start going to the mat once you push them far enough. You're seeing the same thing exactly right now, by the way, in the streets. I don't think you see a lot of people who didn't care one way or the other about Black lives. I think you see a lot of people who did always care about Black lives, but weren't motivated enough to take that to the streets and get riled up about it, taking it to the streets and getting riled up about it. So it's not only a question of changing minds, it's a question of changing the motivation level. And that's what someone like Mayor Pete or whoever follows in his footsteps, I think will someday face on a political level. We've come a long way since, look, I remember 1986 when Barbara Mikulski ran for the Senate, and she ran against Linda Chavez in Maryland. And I'm sure some of you remember these ads too. Chavez's first ads attacking Mikulski were slamming her as a, quote, San Francisco style liberal, which was code word for closet lesbian in 1986. That's the closest you could say to lesbian. And it was a dog whistle that absolutely everybody knew what it meant. That was how you ran against a Democrat in 1986. Have we come a ways since then? In Maryland? Yes. In Nebraska? I don't know. We'll see someday, hopefully soon.
Okay, well, we can always continue the discussion, going forward. Wayne gave you the link, and I'll certainly give you the contact. Anybody thinks of a question tonight or tomorrow, or you want to shoot an email, I'll give you all the contact information. And
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
And Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Phenomenal. So
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
And
Wayne.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
so